Well, hey, welcome to United Opposition with Scott and Marshall. Today we are talking about following the science.
Wait, did it get lost? Did it get lost? Where is it?
Here we go. Yes, this is United Opposition. We're over here, Marshall. This direction, where the camera is.
I was looking for the science.
You're looking for the science. Welcome to United Opposition.
Did you lose it? How did you lose
Scott,
science? You have.
How do we lose science,
bro? Yeah.
This is the show where two people on opposite sides of a lot of political and ideology, we still get to come together. We're still friends, and we still get to come together and have these discussions. Talking, it's raining here, so there's actual. We can measure the rain coming down and get an actual measurement of rainfall today. But can we get an actual measurement of rainfall tomorrow? Not yet, huh? Not yet. So this is United Opposition with 511 Media. We are sponsored by Freedom20, freedom20.com with the water. I'm gonna have my water here. I love their bottles and their labels. Mine currently says freedom to drink, freedom to, it's upside down. Sorry. Freedom to speak, freedom to drink. Sorry, I forgot. I got to turn it this way.
No wonder you lost the science.
Well, yeah, but we didn't lose the election, did we? Oh, sorry. I had to go there. Yeah. I'm sorry about that. Yeah. Freedom20.com sponsors United Opposition and 511 Media. Here is our ASMR sip for the day. Yeah. Following the science. This is a discussion it's interesting because I like science. Which, as a pastor and a conservative, a Christian, you would seem that that these would be in conflict. That I would hate science, but I enjoy science. In fact, physics. Who was our physics teacher? Marshall? I can't remember his name.
Oh gosh, there's Fontaine. There was
yeah, it's Fontaine. I had Fontaine.
Yeah.
Did you take physics in high school?
Yeah, I believe I did. Yeah.
Did you have Fontaine? I had Fontaine. Foothill High School, 1992.
You're bringing up noms, so I don't know, brother.
I'm bringing up past and history and all those things, but yeah, I enjoy physical science. I loved watching MythBusters when it was on TV. I love the scientific method and the process of all that. But where I depart, and this is where we're going to kind of depart. Where I depart is when we use predictive science, theoretical science to make policy that affects us now. That's where I kind of come in. I'm like, hold on a second. I mean, you're getting ready to take away people's, civil liberties and freedoms based on a prediction. And how many times has the prediction been wrong? And your argument is that it corrects itself. Is that right, Marshall? That science will eventually correct itself?
Well, you're mixing burdens here. You're talking about science as a body of knowledge, and then you're talking about it as a forecasting tool, whereas I tend to talk about it as a way of asking questions and talk about it as a verb. It's not a noun, actually. People use science as a noun, but it's not a noun unless they're talking about the body of knowledge that we have. But generally, science is actually a verb. It is something you do. It is a way of
so we can't follow it? Is that why you said you said so we can't follow it?
I don't know.
It's not an object to follow.
Apparently, you lost it somewhere, and now who knows now? Who knows now?
So is it okay that we can use that phrase, following the science?
Yeah.
Or is that a wrong phrase?
So you want to talk about the politics that?
Yes, I want to talk about.
Politicians take science that agrees with them, and then they use it to impose policy, which is not science.
And then people like you, like you say
it's politics.
Follow the science, right? But people like you have said we should follow the science.
Well,
you have used that phrase. That's the reason I chose that phrase, because you have used that. You have used that phrase.
I have, and I do use it. So the question is, how do you know what you know?
Okay. That's a good place to start.
How do you know anything? I mean, that's really Socrates' first question. How do you know anything? How do you know what you know?
even if we want to get to, really philosophical and go into the movies and the way they address that, everything that we see, touch, feel, smell, measure. I love that line in The Matrix. Like, if all that is it's just impulses in your brain, if we can fake those impulses to your brain, then your measuring stick, which is your brain, to everything. How do you know your measuring stick is correct?
Right. That's Rene Descartes.
Yeah.
17th century philosopher Rene Descartes, who is like, how do you know what you know? Because if everything is a sense impression or a memory of a sense impression, then how do you know that your experiences are authentic? And what Rene Descartes tried to do was he tried to distill everything down to one fundamental truth. An axiom is what we call it, which is an indisputable fact. And it came down to cognito ergo sum, which is Latin for I think, therefore I am. And the only thing that he could be certain of was that he existed because he was thinking. He could not be sure whether he was a person or a fly or an animal or a figment of something else's imagination. The only thing he could be certain of was that he existed. Now, of course, he had to water that down and moderate it because he didn't want to get in trouble with the church and the authorities and other things in that day. But that's where that comes from. Cognito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am.
Is it cognito or cogito?
I believe it's cognito, but I could be wrong. Maybe it's cogito. Who knows? I'm supposed to be able to speak a little Latin, but I haven't looked at that phrase in a long time.
I was watching that guy on the YouTube channel, the British guy. As long as anybody, if they use a British accent when they're talking, they automatically sound like they know more. But it's that British guy with the beard, and he was talking about this new weapon system that to fight off drones, and he was calling it. What was he calling it? He's calling Leonidas. It's like, okay, well, he's never seen 300. It's Leonidas. I don't know,
right?
But but every time he said it for his entire 30-minute video, it's like Leonidas or something like that. I'm like, I don't know. Is he wrong or is he right? I mean, he was speaking in a British accent, so maybe he was right.
Yeah, aluminium. Okay, yeah, whatever.
Where's the I?
Anyway, yeah. Okay, so
going from that point, from the you only can know that you exist because you are thinking. Going from that point, then what can we do? What is your suggestion? Because you and I have gotten into these discussions to where I want to rely on common sense and you want to rely on science for making policy. So how do we get there? How do we agree? How do we get to what science would you say is worth making policy for? What's your limitation?
Okay, I'm not clear what your question is. I feel like you just shotgun 3 questions at me. So,
it's kind of it's the general. And again, I'm not trying to ask you to answer these separate specific questions. What I'm trying to say,
I mean, that's fair.
Yeah. But that's not. I wasn't trying to pin you down on something. What I was trying to start the discussion of. I think it's dangerous to limit people's civil liberties and freedoms based on what scientists say might happen in the future. When scientists say we need to make these regulations because we predict this is what's going to happen in 10 to 15 years if we don't. And these regulations affect us now based on what they predict is going to happen in 10 to 20 years. And I've lived long enough now, you and I have both lived long enough. I've lived long enough to see and remember the predictions from the late 70s and all through the 80s and 90s and all the predictions of it's good whales. You remember Ted Danson, Save the Whales, right? Remember remember acid rain from the 80s, right? You remember all this stuff of, in 20 years, it wasn't. There's a Forbes article that talks about that it was a complete, yeah. Okay. But that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. It's like, we discover later on, oh, well, that's okay. That wasn't exactly right, but now it's right. Our prediction back then, we didn't have all that's always the answer. When the prediction doesn't happen, the answer is always, well, we know more now than we did then. So you really should listen to us now. Right. And then in 20 years, but now we know more. You should listen to us now. It's like, when do we have common sense to say, you know what? Why are we making policy today based on predictions in the future when there's a track record of those predictions being wrong?
Right. So
where's your limit?
Right. Science doesn't tell us anything that's for certain. What it really does is it gives us a range of probabilities. We'd call a stochastic range of probabilities. It's pretty good at doing that. And it has an excellent track record of doing so. And at the end of the day, you have to use logic, right? Like I said, there are certain fundamental truths that are called axioms. And you start with the axioms, the idea that 1 + 1 = 2. That is always going to be true. And then you could take from this and simple rules of logic, and you can then build upon it. You can build a framework or a paradigm.
It's like playing a really big game of Sudoku.
I guess, yes, you are.
You're playing really big.
Yeah,
you know really this
cool,
number. This number is logic here.
Yeah. That's exactly it. I really like that analogy, Scott. I want to praise you for coming up with that. That's smart. So didn't know he had it in him, But
no, you didn't, did you?
But there you go. But you can then infer things from that. And the problem is the scientific process has become politicized, especially here in the United States. At the end of the day, it comes down to how do you know what you know? And the fact is, even scientists can't always be certain of what they predict, because these systems, like you look at the climate systems, right? Because you referenced, climate debate. Climate is a very sophisticated system. There are a lot of feedback loops. There are a lot of unknown variables. There's things we can't quantify. For example, if you took the predictions back in the 1980s and you left out the fact that the ocean works as a big reservoir for CO2, well, yeah, the predictions make sense. But when you realize the oceans can absorb incredible amounts of CO2, then you get something that's more in line with what we have today. And because today we're able to monitor the oceans more closely using buoys and satellites and ships that go out to sea and measure everything, now we have a better understanding why the dire predictions of the 80s didn't come to pass. That doesn't mean we're not in trouble. You can't pump the ocean full of the amount of CO2 and heating that we've pumped it full of without a consequence. Well, take a look at the Great Barrier Reef. The Great Barrier Reef is dying. It's bleaching in incredible quantities. And it's going to be extinct in a matter of years at the current rate of change.
How many years?
I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head.
Because that's the thing. That's the thing I want to come back to, because it's always a number of years that's just close enough to scare you. It should scare you. No, but I'm saying they make a prediction of years that's just close enough to make you scared, but just far enough away that you'll forget that they made that prediction. It's always 10, 15, 20 years, so that when you're 10, 15, 20 years away and none of that happened, nobody's going to remember. You're going to be gaslighted. No, I remember. No, that wasn't really what we were talking about. What we were really talking about was this. This is what we were talking about. You should listen to us now. It's like, it's just enough time.
All the scientists can do is do the research, submit it for peer review. And when there is enough peer review performed, meaning enough other scientists who are experts in that particular field, who have reviewed your science and run tests of their own, and everybody agrees, you get what's called a consensus. Scientific consensus is a little bit uncommon. It's out there, and there are certain things that are kind of beyond dispute, like gravity and so on, obviously.
Yeah.
But when you do get scientific consensus on something such as climate change, you better listen. Now,
no, I don't think you have to.
Well, okay,
because we listened to the consensus. We listened to the consensus back in the 80s that butter is bad for you. So you should have margarine because trans fats are much better for you. That's the science. So that's the consensus.
Here's what clouds all that, right?
Yeah.
You get money and you get politics.
Yes.
In that you have politicians and you have businesses in particular, and they are the ones who take the science, or they will sponsor somebody who's a scientist or something, and they basically pay for somebody to say, it's like the cigarette commercials, right? Like, my doctor recommends Marlboro. You know, you're like, what the heck? Because that was a thing. And the scientists that said cigarette smoking was safe were simply co-opted and moved into the food industry, where they
Mm-hmm.
continue to ply their trade, the next generation
Uh-huh.
doing the same thing. So
Mm-hmm.
you're correct. So what you have to be able to do is you have to filter through the science.
I
You
just think
have
it's
to
funny that
look.
you don't think that's still happening.
It is still happening.
It's
It is
exactly
still
what's happening
happening.
in climate science. It's exactly
But
what's happening in medicine.
no,
Yes,
not
it's
necessarily.
still
No.
happening.
Here's the thing.
Oh, so
There
it's not
are
happening now
enough.
that you agree with it. With the things that you agree with, then it's not happening.
Okay, Ben Shapiro. Look, the fact of the matter is there are plenty of independent scientists around the world. There's plenty of observational data that is so absolutely obvious because you can view it with your own eyes
Mm-hmm.
that it demonstrates to you that the planet is undergoing a very rapid climatological change. And the pace of that change is so great that nature cannot evolve species and keep up with it. And the consequence of that is that you're going to lose certain species. We are in the middle of what's called the sixth mass extinction. And if you lose a keystone species that's critical to the food chain, well, there it goes. Now, Earth is going to be fine. I just
Mm-hmm.
don't know about humanity. But when it comes to something about climate change, there has been more consensus on this than probably any other scientific idea in history. And it's because it's interdisciplinary. You have animal scientists, you have climate scientists, you have botanists, you have meteorologists, you have people from all across the scientific spectrum telling you that this is happening. And so if you put your head in the sand on an issue such as climate change, you're doing so at your own peril. Are you free to do so? Yes. Should we make policy to avert the worst of the climate crisis to come? I think that we should, but what should that policy be? And that is something for us to debate. The purpose
Mm-hmm.
of science, though, is not to determine what we should do. It is to inform our discussion of what we should do.
Do you think it's possible that there is corruption in current science? That money has corrupted, that money and power and prestige has corrupted to cause these scientists to start at an already agreed upon premise and then to move forward from there? Because there are scientists. There's
unethical people in science.
Yeah,
sure.
But I'm saying there are scientists who are using science to challenge what is the consensus, to challenge what is the consensus of the majority, and these people are not given credence. These people are not given the same, because I know you like to say that science will eventually work itself out, that people will come up and challenge it, but the people who are challenging it are being put off to the side, just like we saw in the health side of COVID. The people who came out and said, this is not what is being predicted. The vaccine is not what people are saying. The origin of COVID, and they were silenced. They were put off. The government said, our pop culture said, don't listen to that. That's not real. And then we come 4 or 5 years later, like, oh, okay, well, maybe they were right. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah. So there, it doesn't, yes, it does work itself out eventually, but what happened in the meantime? How many civil liberties were violated? How much regulation? Because we still, the companies that when it turns out that the acid rain wasn't what they said, we were still stuck with the regulations that were created because of that prediction. That right. Companies were based on science that was proven wrong, but the regulations still exist. So that I want to get to what my main issue is with this is that when we allow predictive theoretical science about the future if we allow that to have influence on the regulations and laws that we make today, when in however many decades it takes for the science to be proven wrong, the regulations are still there. The freedoms have still been lost, and getting those regulations changed and getting our freedoms back is already done. It's done and gone. And like, oh, okay, well, we were wrong about the science, but now those regulations still exist and your freedoms are still limited. I want us to be slower in making regulations I want us to be slower in making laws and regulations that limit freedom and limit our civil liberties if it's based on predictive science. It's based on, here's this science model, here's these scientists, we all have consensus, we really believe it's going to do this, and in order to not do it, you need to give up some of your freedoms. That way, our prediction models say that if you stay free and if you do what you want, these things are going to go bad. So we need to make sure we make laws and regulations that limit your freedom based on this science that 10, 12 years, 15 years, 20 years later is going to be like, oh, sorry, we were wrong about the science. But hey, those laws still exist. That's what I'm fearful of. I want it to slow down. I want policy, regulation, and laws that limit our freedoms. I want those to happen much slower, no matter what the science says.
Yeah.
To give us time to let the science work out before we lose our freedoms.
Yeah, understand that not every contrarian scientist is Galileo, nor are all contrarians actually qualified to speak in their field. It depends, and there are certain levels of accuracy or certainty, I should say, in the different science in scientific ideas. For example, you have a hypothesis, and a hypothesis is an educated guess. Usually there is some sort of evidence or something to support it, but it's just an educated guess. Okay. And then you have facts, and a fact is something that is established and is pretty much beyond doubt because it's been tested repeatedly, found to be true. That's a fact. Okay. And then you get to theory. And when you have a theory is kind of the highest of your scientific facts or whatever. It's literally a bundle of facts that are put together in a coherent manner that makes sense, and you get what's called a scientific theory. Things like climate change and human evolutionary theory are absolutely beyond question from a scientific perspective. Anybody who argues those things, they are not doing
it's
science.
Not the, but it's not the same.
Something else.
It's not the type of science to base regulations on. When you can when you can measure that object A at this weight falls at this speed and has this, and impacts the ground with this much joules of energy, then you build your building to hold that up so it doesn't fall. That's fine. Build regulations based on that science because that's actually measurable right now. That is a fact. A fact is a piece of iron weighing this much falls and impacts with this much impact when it hits the ground. So you need this much strength to hold it up. That's fine. Build building regulations, make regulations on that. With the predictive stuff that we're going to make regulations right now based on somebody's prediction on a track record that shows that predictions haven't actually happened, that they keep adjusting. The goalpost keeps getting moved every decade. It keeps getting moved. We should slow down regulations based on that. We should slow down making laws on that. That's a different kind. I don't know how, I don't trust that kind of science, whatever you want to call it. I call it theoretical science. Any science that's based on what you cannot measure right now, I feel is theoretical science. You cannot measure the future. You cannot measure the past.
You can't measure it. It's not science.
Okay, well then fine. Then those things are not science based on
measure what is measurable, make measurable what is not. That's Galileo again. But here's the thing: you have to be wise. There may be certain things where you say, okay, we're not going to make regulations on this, but there are other things where you better look at it and think twice before you say, we don't want to, make a regulation, because if you ignore the information that scientists are providing you with, you could end up out of the game in some fashion, like but
that's the weight. That's the weight that they want you to believe. That's the weight they want you to carry. If you don't act now, it'll be too late. If we don't act now, I would rather say, you know what? Let's not act now, and let's see. Let's see, this will happen in 10 years. All right, let's not do anything.
What happens?
Let's not. Yeah, let's not do anything and let 5 years go by and do nothing. The prediction is 20 years. Let's let 10 years go by and do nothing. Then we say, I'm saying, then if we start saying, hey, look, it actually did that. Okay, so now let's start. Now let's move.
Here's the solution.
There's been too many policies written based on, if you don't move now, this is the end of the world.
For a guy who lost the science, you sure have a lot to say.
For a guy who what?
Who lost the science. Here's the thing. You have to look. I think it's appropriate to do a deep dive on each of these issues to look at the scientists. Where's the scientists getting their funding?
Mhm.
What's their background? What's their agenda? Are they truly an expert in the field? I think we should do that all day long. I really, really do. I really think we need to vet the science. Was the scientific method correctly followed? Do their
Mhm.
hypotheses and their facts and their theories, does it all line up? Do they have their ducks in a row? And I think if we do a forensic deep dive and examination, particularly paying attention to the money,
Yeah.
and we look at where all these people who are pushing these ideas and concepts are coming from, then I think we can be better informed about what we should be making policy on. When it comes to the climate science, you've got people that are not only from multiple disciplines, but from multiple nations all around the world.
Mhm.
And the only people who are funding the scientists on the other side, the scientists on the other side, are typically funded by think tanks which have an agenda. And their science also doesn't come out in the wash.
I love how you don't think the other side has an agenda. That's cute.
What, save the world, save the planet, prevent great mass human suffering a century or so in the future? Yeah, that's an agenda. You bet they have an agenda. You know, uh,
I can
should
get
the
funding. I
agenda?
can get strong funding. I can get major funding if I'm pushing a theory that everyone agrees with.
No,
That's an
not
agenda.
necessarily. No, no, no. You
That's
have
an
to,
agenda.
when you do science, you need to be contributing something new or worthwhile to the body of knowledge. You generally have to apply for grants. And I know this because I write grants.
Mhm.
It ain't like that. It ain't like, hey, I'll shill for the big climate conspiracy guys. Give me a check. No, it does not work like that. A lot of these people are also doing these things independently. They're doing their own independent work. Or unrelated scientists are stumbling upon facts or information that tie into this and support it. Again, you
But
have to look.
is there not an incentive? Is there not an incentive to fall in line? You will lose your reputation if you
No,
if you if you come
can
against the
destroy.
if you come against the consensus.
No, well, I don't know,
Yeah.
but I
If
no
you come
no no.
against the
I would tell
consensus,
you that if you can destroy an existing scientific paradigm, if you can unseat the consensus and entrench a new paradigm on the ashes of the old, then you'll be again like Galileo. That's Galileo's the poster child for that, right? Copernicus, poster child for that. If you could do that, your career is made. You don't even have to work another day. You can just write a couple books and just profit and give speeches whenever you want a quick payday. It's great. You'd have it made as a scientist. But that's not what scientists are doing. These guys are not out there driving sports cars. They're not living in mansions or any of that, They're teaching at universities and they're doing this research on the side because they got a grant to do it, but it's not the body of science, the scientists that are out there at the colleges and the universities and the private institutions that are doing the work.
somebody's paying for that.
Well, yeah, but they're not getting rich off of it. Okay.
No,
So it's not like that.
but somebody's paying for that.
Well, yeah, you got to get paid because you got to pay bills, you got to eat.
Who is paying for that?
All kinds of people and entities are paying for it. Like, who pays you? I mean, it's a silly question, Scott, because I think if you want to drill down, it's okay to ask that question for each specific scientist. They're all being funded, but the funding comes from all kinds of directions. But at the end of the day, there's a consensus when it comes to something like climate change. There are other issues where we have to look, I think, a little more closely. You mentioned the COVID thing, and I would agree with you.
But you didn't 4 years ago. You didn't 4 years ago.
Correct.
You were follow the science. You were all about that.
Because Scott, we didn't have time.
And you were wrong.
To roll dice.
And you were wrong.
Okay, but what if I wasn't?
That's always your answer. But what if I wasn't? That's always the answer. But what if I wasn't? But what if that? But what if we're right? But what if we're right?
Don't you? I mean, why would you go all in based on? Well, I've got a pair of twos. I'm going to go all in. I mean, you're probably going to lose that hand. Game theory tells us that you have to make a decision while weighing the risks, the possible consequences of being wrong. And if you're wrong, you don't want to go all in because it puts you out of the game. With something like a pandemic disease where we lost 1 million Americans, 1 million Americans died during the COVID pandemic. Had we taken stronger actions at the very beginning of it, we might have curtailed that number somehow.
Most of those numbers were older people who were isolated, and the isolation caused that. But I'm saying but what I'm saying, yes, their lives matter. But what I'm saying is the policies we followed is what caused their deaths.
Well, we can get into that, and here's the problem: when you have,
but we know it now.
When you have a rapidly evolving or developing situation such as a pandemic, you have to err on the side of caution. You can be informed by past experiences, which I think you should be. You have to do the science. You have to do it as quickly as you can. It's probably going to be imperfect because you just don't have time. But at the end of the day, it's like if there's a zombie apocalypse and someone's banging on your door and you have to make a quick decision. Do you open the door or do you at least wait to check the peephole? What do? You wait. You have to, you wait. In this case,
we have to slow down. As a society, we have to slow down. We cannot.
No. There are times when you have to make a snap decision. Sometimes the correct decision is not to wait, and so it depends.
It's rarely that. Right. It's rarely that. But that's the argument. We talked about this before. That's the scientists who are involved. They are the ones who are like, oh my gosh, I've been studying this my whole life. Oh, we've been waiting for this to happen. And now this is the one. You have to do it. You have to listen to us. Hurry. This is the one. This is the one. 5 years later. Oh, I guess that wasn't the one. Oh, well, sorry. But they wanted it to be the one. So again, you keep going back to the poker game. You keep going back to the poker game to where I'm looking at my pair of twos and betting on that. That's not what's happening. You're saying, Scott, your cards are a pair of twos. What is going to be your call? I don't get to see my cards. You're telling me make the bet and your cards are a pair of two. How do I trust that my cards are a pair of twos?
Well, yeah, I guess.
How do I trust that?
But
I can't. When you're the one saying, when the people in charge are saying, nope, you only have a pair of twos. You only have a pair of twos. We got to, you got to make this decision now. We can't take the risk. You can't take the risk. You only have a pair of twos. I don't know that. So let's slow down and find out what our cards actually are. That's what I say. I think it's worth it to stay slow. It's worth it to stay slow.
That's what science does. And right
now, but the people who want to manipulate science. Yeah, the people who want to manipulate science want us to hurry. Anytime I see a politician that says we have to hurry based on this scientific model, we must do this now. It's like, no, let's slow down. Yeah, I've lived through too many times that's been abused.
Sure. And that's a political problem, not a science problem. That's a political problem, not a science problem. So
but I think the phrase follow the science, I don't think it's a scientific phrase. It's a political phrase. And it's just as real. We need to slow down. That's all that I'm saying. So the whole follow the science, we need to slow that down. We need to slow down our political decisions and our regulations when it's based on science. We need to slow down.
And what I would tell you is that there's a time to slow down, but there's also a time to act quickly. And this is why it's very important that we elect wise people with intelligent advisors, not a Fox News cabinet, to bring it home, because our lives depend on these people making the right decision. And they have to make the right call. And you're right. Sometimes to slow down, that's the right call. Sometimes
that should be our default. That should be our default. Default should be slow, because how often is it actually the emergency? How often is it actually the emergency?
Maybe more often than we realize, and we just don't know it.
But again, I'm inside my house and I've got my shotgun. There's somebody banging on my door outside. Do I just shoot through the door? Well, I mean, what if they get through? What if they get through? Should I just hurry up and shoot through the door, or should I slow down?
Yeah.
What are the odds? What are the actual odds of it being? What's the actual odds of it being that emergency? I think we should default to the slowness.
But there are also analogies on the opposite side, where if you don't act quickly, disaster will occur.
But those are rare.
But
default.
But they happen.
But they're rare.
They happen. Okay, so my point is, you need to be smart enough to know when to hold them and when to fold them, when to walk away, when to run. That's
And
it.
the best way to do that is to make sure you're able to look at the cards. Don't trust somebody else to tell you what your cards are.
Maybe, but you also have to pay attention to other factors, like
All
the
right.
person's tell, how they're playing, how they're betting. It's a
Yep.
whole thing because you're
And
playing the person, not the cards.
Yeah. The one person is holding all the cards and saying, here's your cards, bet against me.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, this is your card and bet against me. I'm like, yeah, I don't trust you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, don't mischaracterize science. Characterize the politics, but don't mischaracterize science. Science is the best tool you've got. If you don't have science, I don't know what tool you've got, but it ain't knowledge based. Okay.
Faith.
All right. Yeah, you have faith. Good luck.
That has held longer than science.
Okay. Good luck.
Well, this has been United Opposition with Scott and Marshall talking about following the science. Where to go? I guess we lost it. I don't know, but we'll be back next time.
Don't
You go
worry.
find
I'll
it for us.
find
I
it.
appreciate that. All right. Until next week. Thanks. God bless you guys.